Hey everyone, I'm Andrew Willard, and this is my leadership project. First, let me assure you this project has nothing to do with the University of Oregon. I'm from Portland, Oregon, and a lifelong Duck fan, and so sometimes when I give presentations, whether on campus or online, I like to dress up in my Duck gear and get a few laughs and some mean stares if I'm on campus and some chuckles and just have a little fun with giving presentations. And I think specifically for this project, it's important to maybe ease the tension a little bit because the leader I chose is President George W. Bush. Let me first off start by saying that I understand that politics is a very touchy subject with a lot of people, and we have very strong, deep-rooted beliefs, whether they're left, right, center, Democrat, or Republican. This project is not here to try and change your views. In fact, I'm not going to even address the entire presidency of George W. Bush. This is mainly about how President Bush led our country after the horrific terrorist attacks of September 11th, 2001. I think whether you agree or disagree with me, we all can agree that the policies that President Bush and his administration implemented post 9/11 undoubtedly protected our country from further horrible terrorist attacks. And I understand there's been many terrorist attacks within our country since 9/11, but nothing to the scale of what happened on September 11th. And in fact, in doing this project and reading the articles that I chose and the books that I chose to read, I found it quite amazing that all the authors came to one conclusion that they all agreed on, and that was that President Bush had united our country to a way that we had not seen since the attacks of Pearl Harbor during World War II. I want to first focus on modeling the way our book talks about modeling the way by words and deeds, and those should be consistent with each other. And there's no doubt in my mind that President Bush, when he gave his speeches, followed through with them. Some of you guys may remember, if you're old enough, President Bush went down to Ground Zero to address the first responders and grabbed a bullhorn and, to sum up, basically said that the nation hears you guys, the world will hear you guys, and the terrorists who brought down these buildings will hear from all of us soon. And that crowd erupted into cheers and chants of USA, USA. And after that, President Bush went in front of Congress on September 20th, 2001 to declare war on terrorism. During that speech, he basically gave the terrorists an ultimatum and said, turn yourselves in, get rid of your organizations, or you will face the same fate that the terrorists that knocked down the buildings fate, and that was death. President Bush also addressed Saddam Hussein in that speech and basically gave him 48 hours to turn himself in along with the rest of the terrorists, or they will, for lack of a better word, face the wrath of the United States of America. After the 48 hours was up, and Saddam Hussein had not turned himself in and no terrorists had turned themselves in, we started what was known as the shock and awe attack on Iraq. For those of you that don't know what that is, U.S. bombers and naval ships unleashed a bunch of missiles and bombs on Iraq to specific targets related to terrorism. Now, President Bush didn't just speak and do nothing. President Bush spoke and did something. And that, to me, is modeling the way of a good leader. Not only modeling the way, but President Bush challenged the process by attacking Iraq and following through with his words. As our textbook says, I'm going to quote this, every single personal best leadership case involved a change from the status quo. Leaders venture out. They don't just sit idly waiting for fate to smile on them. President Bush didn't just sit back and wait for another attack, on our country. He went after those people that did this to us, and some may argue that yes, they lived in Afghanistan, Iran, Pakistan, but they were also in Iraq too. And Saddam Hussein was one of those leaders who helped fund these terrorist organizations and had caused major problems in the region for Saudi Arabia, Yemen, stuff like that, or countries like that. And so President Bush modeled the way and challenged the process by acting on his words and not just sitting back and waiting for us to be attacked again. Finally, I wanted to talk a little bit about enabling others to act. As it says, a grand dream doesn't become a single act reality through the actions of a single person. It requires a team. President Bush didn't do this by himself, and President Bush required congressional approval to go to war. And during that time in our country, President Bush had that backing from a split Congress politically to a united Congress against the war on terror. President Bush also led by empowering those people around him and throughout our country. Our country was so united that we saw flags on every door, car, support our troops was everywhere, and our U.S. military was angry, for lack of a better term, and they were out to get those people that had attacked us. And our military did that. They ended up capturing Saddam Hussein, who was hiding in a hole in some dirt, dug up in a farm field. And ultimately, he was brought to justice through his own courts and sentenced to death. Now listen, I'm a veteran of the Iraq War, and I served under President Clinton and President Bush, and I took an oath to follow those orders of those appointed over me. Whether you approve of what President Bush did, his actions after 9/11 undoubtedly united our country and made at least our country a safer place. And regardless, again, as if you like President Bush or approve of what he did, he led our country in one of its darkest hours, and I would not have wished that stress on anybody. Listen, I could go on and on if I had enough time to talk about President Bush and the things that I feel that he did post 9/11 for our country. But he did the best he could. He's not perfect. Nobody is. Every president is looked down upon by those who don't support him. But I really feel that President Bush led the way, challenged the process, and enabled others to act by his leadership and the things that he did for our country post 9/11. And that's why I really thought it was important to focus specifically on just 9/11 rather than his entire presidency. I just want to thank you guys all for taking the time to watch my video, and I understand again that some of you may agree, some of you may not agree, but the fact of the matter is President Bush did the best he could. He led our country in a time of extreme stress, and while we all have our own opinions, I ask that at least you be respectful in your responses to my project, as I am respectful and understand that you guys all have your own political views. Thank you so much for watching. Go Ducks, and have a great day.